Welcome back to Storytellers Behind the Scenes. I am so delighted to be here today, wishing you a very happy new year, 2023. Here we come. It's our year. Let's kick some ass, people. I could not be more thrilled today to bring you this conversation that I had with my former boss and dear friend, Marc Summers. He is a delight, the best storyteller I know, and he has so much compassion. I am really excited to have him here and share all of his wisdom with you. And I know you're going to enjoy this episode. So sit back, grab a drink, and let's get to it. Welcome, Marc Summers. I am so thrilled to have you on my podcast, Storytellers Behind the Scenes. If there's anybody that I consider a storyteller, it is you, my friend. You are one of the greatest storytellers of all time. I always admired you from a distance because I worked on the show Unwrapped, never met you in person, but I felt like we had this relationship going for years. And then when I went to work for you at Restaurant Impossible, it was just beyond thrilling to be in the same building with you and to call you my boss. But you were always warm and generous with your time and really caring. You brought a sense of humor to everything. Where did how did this all start for you? When you were a kid, did you know you wanted to be in front of the camera or a comedian or, a TV star?
When I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, I used to watch the Ed Sullivan Show with my parents every Sunday night. And I would see comedians, Myron Cohen and Jack Carter. And I thought to myself, well, how do you get that job, And then all of a sudden, I became familiar with a man by the name of Johnny Carson. I'd get home from school, and he had a show on ABC called Who Do You Trust? It was a game show. And there was just something magical about this guy. And then when he became the host of The Tonight Show, I thought, well, okay, I want to grow up and be Johnny Carson. But prior to that, I would come home from Miss Helm's nursery school and turn on a show called Truth or Consequences that Bob Barker was hosting. So between Barker and Carson, I thought, well, these guys have the best jobs in the world, and I want to do that. The problem is in Indianapolis, how does one get a job in the entertainment business? I figured it out, believe it or not. I was lucky enough. I started as a disc jockey when I was 15 years old on a station in Elwood, Indiana, WBMP FM. When I left, Dave Letterman took my place. And I also started doing magic on kids' TV shows. There was a guy who was an insurance salesman in upstate New York. He called himself Dante. Now, there was a real magician at one time, very famous, named Dante. He took the name Dante and started the Dante magic sets, and I saw him on a bunch of kid shows in Indianapolis. Somehow I tracked his home number down. I don't remember how I did it. I was all of 12 years old, and I said, I want to be—
You're kidding me.
Yeah, no, really. And I said, I want to be the national spokesperson for the Dante magic set. And he said to me, hey, kid, you can do whatever you want, but I'm not paying you. So I said, will you send me some of the kits? And he said, yes. So I started calling every local station in Indianapolis and said I was the national spokesperson and I wanted to get on the show. And I got on all these shows because back in the day, every local channel had a kid show on a Saturday or a Sunday. And at the end of one show, Popeye and Janie, I said, well, you should bring me back for more of these. So for the next couple of years, my mom would pick me up from West Lane Junior High at 3:30 and drive me down to the south side of Indianapolis. And I would do magic on Popeye and Janie for a number of years. So I found a way to get involved in the entertainment business, but realized Indianapolis was not the mecca of showbiz. I went to college in Boston in 1971 and met, Bert Dubrow, who was the exec producer eventually of Sally Jesse Raphael and Jerry Springer, Paul Fusco, who created Alf. I went to school with Andy Kaufman. And so it was a school of misfits. We all knew that we didn't want to be in college. We just wanted to go work on our craft. And so we were there for 2 years and kind of went our separate ways. I started at the Magic Castle in 1973 as a regular in Los Angeles and became a regular at the Comedy Store in 1976 with Dave Letterman, Robin Williams, Jay Leno, Gary Shandling, and started to do warm-ups on television shows. So I always had a mission, and I was not afraid to work my rear end off and do 7 days a week, which is what I did.
Hold everything here. All of these people whose names you just threw out there, Letterman and Shandling, and you guys were all like in your early 20s when you started at the comedy,
Yeah, I
in
was
the
25.
comedy route?
And Shandling at the time was working. He was a writer on Welcome Back, Cotter. He was a great, had this great ability to look at your act and tell you how to restructure your joke to get more laughs. He was fantastic that way. Dave, I kind of knew from Indianapolis. We used to play racquetball together in LA, and got to know him really well. Leno was always nice. Robin Williams, sweetest guy in the world. So yeah, we all started right about the same time, and that's when you would stand in line on Monday night to become a regular. I did for about a year before I became a regular. There were 25, 50 people in line. And then when the whole comedy thing hit, there would be 300 people in line. And I got in just under that because everybody started to think they were funny and 90% of them sucked.
So there would be 300 people in line just to get the opportunity to get on stage.
For 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you find that inner strength to keep going back, and keep getting in that line? This is one of the hardest businesses in the world. You don't get patted on the back very much. And it's like you have to really be your own driving force.
I have a one-man show, and one of the lines in it is "no never means no." So I never accepted the word no. I had uh, an executive at NBC who was a Jewish guy. I'm a Jewish guy. He told me I would never work until I changed my name, which was Berkowitz at the time, and get a nose job. And I just figured, well, at some point he's going to get fired, so it won't make any difference. And 6 months later, he did get fired. So I met the next guy who took his place. So I just kept moving forward. I kind of never gave up because I had my eye on the ball and it was my passion. I worked 28 shows a week at the Magic Castle for $145. Originally, the Comedy Store, we got paid nothing until we had the comedian strike, and then we would get money. First, I think it was 10 or 15 bucks just to be there and get on stage. But then when we played the bigger room, we would get a percentage of what they sold ticket-wise that night. So I'd get checks sometimes for $80, which was like dying and going to heaven back in 76, 77. But I started to make money doing warm-ups. I was a warm-up guy on Star Search and Alice and Webster and What's Happening Now and Our Magazine. And I was working 6 days a week, making six figures when nobody knew those jobs existed. But the
Wait
problem
a second. When you say a warm-up guy, and I excuse me for interrupting you, but when you say warm-up guy, you mean when there's a live show, there's a person that comes out and rallies everybody and pumps them up. Yeah, I've been to a lot of recordings, and a lot of people don't know that that's why people get all, jacked up.
Oh, yeah. I was a page on Mary Tyler Moore and on Newhart, and there was a man by the name of Lorenzo Music who I watched and admired and thought did the best warm-up ever. And so I went into his office one day as a page, and I had gonads of steel, and I said, hey, you're the best. I do warm-ups. And he said, oh, really? What shows have you done warm-ups on? And I lied. I mentioned a bunch of shows that I had never done a warm-up in my life. And he said, well, give me your number. Someday if I can't do one of these things, I'll call you. Well, 2 weeks later, he calls me and says, we're doing a pilot with a guy by the name of Barnard Hughes, who was on Broadway, but we want to do a show called Doc. Can you do the warm-up? And I said, absolutely. Well, I was pooping my pants because I didn't know what the hell to do. So I started to make a list on a legal pad, magic tricks that I knew, just a bunch of stuff, and just was so frightened. And I went out there and did this warm-up. And at the end of the night, Grant Tinker, who was Mary Tyler Moore's husband and ran the company, came down, threw his arms around me and said, that may be the best warm-up I've ever seen in my entire life. I didn't even know what I had done. And it kind of opened a door. The first real job as a regular I got was on soap. I was an extra on soap for a year, and I saw the guy doing the warm-ups wasn't killing it. So my Uncle Fred in Toledo knew Danny Thomas. So I used that to call Tony Thomas, the exec producer. I said, you don't know me, but your dad was best friends with my uncle. I've been an extra on your show for the last year. Are you going to keep the same warm-up guy? And he said, we were just talking about that. We don't know why. And I said, well, I do warm-ups. Can I get an opportunity? And he said, we're doing a run-through with an audience on Thursday. Why don't you come and do the warm-up on Thursday? If we like you, you can have the season. And if not, have a nice life. So I went in, did it. And for the next 3 years, I did the warm-ups on soap. And when I was doing the warm-ups on soap, to the studio next to me was Bosom Buddies, and Bob Saget was doing the warm-ups on that. And to the left of me, they were doing Barney Miller, and Letterman was doing the warm-ups on that. So it was a way to get in front of an audience and practice your craft and get paid for it.
And how fun is that, to be able to not just work beside these people, but then all of the opportunities that you had. The stars on the show Soap were incredible. Wasn't
Yeah, if
Billy
I would get in
Crystal on
trouble,
Soap?
well, pardon me?
Was Billy Crystal on Soap, if I
Billy
remember?
saved my rear end many times when, we would do a dress rehearsal, which was about an hour and 15, 20 minutes, and then break for dinner. And then sometimes we'd go till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, getting the real show done. And I had Billy to go to. I had Jay Johnson, who did ventriloquism with Bob. And for a while, John Biner was on the show. So both John and Jay and Billy Billy would do his Muhammad Ali for me. And it was fun to have that sort of interaction with those people and build a rapport.
Were you able to bounce ideas off of them, or who was your sounding board early on when you were starting to write, your shtick, when you were building that confidence, because, you know, listening to yourself, a lot of us, think we crack ourselves up, right? And as you said earlier, we're not very funny.
Yeah.
So how did you figure it out?
I was working at the Comedy Store one night, and two gentlemen came up to me, Ellis Levinson and Glenn Super, who were comics who were regulars and had a lot more experience than me, and said to me, your act's okay, but you need some help. And I said, yeah, but I don't know what I'm doing. And both Ellis and Glenn took me under their wings and started to teach me how to structure a joke and how to put an act together. At the time at the Comedy Store, we usually got like 7, 8, 9 minutes, unless you were a bigger name, and then you would get 12 or 15. But and then, like I said, Chandling would give me the tips along the way. And it was actually a very collaborative time where comedians would say, that's a good joke about, going to the supermarket, but let me tell you how you can make it a little better. And it was fun. That turned around about the 80s, when everybody got very competitive and there was all this stuff about stealing jokes, and it was a nightmare. I'm glad I wasn't a part of that. But I was in the Comedy Store at the right place at the right time.
Did you meet George Carlin by any
Yep.
chance?
I did.
Because
I knew George.
we
Yep.
saw him at the Comedy Store one time. We happened to be shooting something, and he was working out an HBO special. He was working on all his jokes, which was really interesting. It gave us sort of this behind the scenes feel, because he would go through something and nobody would laugh, or, one person would laugh and he'd toss his 3x5 card. He's like, that's out, or he'd have to redo something 1 or 2 times to get his timing right.
Yep.
That was fascinating to me, because I felt like I was part of, him working through a show, and then I watched it on HBO. So, I'm just curious, when you worked with all these people and then you saw them, hit the big time, it must have been fulfilling for you.
Well, people don't realize how hard it is to put a solid hour of comedy together. I mean, it takes forever, and you got to get up on stage. Some people would do the Comedy Store, the Improv. There was a place called the Comedy and Magic Club. There's a place called the Laugh Stop. I mean, they would drive from club to club to club and do the same act over and over and over, and start to weed out what didn't work and start to put the act together. So you say, wow, so-and-so just did an hour special on HBO. I wonder when their next one is. At least a year away, because it's going to take that long to come up with new material. George was a sweet guy. He was the one who told me that half the time when he was on the road, he didn't know what city he was in. He'd literally pick up the phone and say, where am I? And he also taught me about merchandise. He said he made more money selling T-shirts and at the time tapes and then CDs than he ever got, just doing the gig. And I kept that in the back of my head, because eventually I toured and took that knowledge and used it.
It's so funny you said that, because I remember as a little kid, I must have been in elementary school. My brother had George Carlin's album, the 10, 12 words you can't say, shit, motherfucker, or whatever all that was. And I would be glued to his door, and my mother would be like, what are you doing? I'm like, don't worry about it. I think that's where I learned how to curse so much. Actually, I owe that to George Carlin. So how did you make the leap from comedy? Because you went on to television and you slayed it. So can you take us through that progression?
I didn't slay it initially. I came out and I really wanted to host game shows or a talk show. And I was out in LA about 13 years. And I started to hit the, I don't think this is ever going to work situation. I was about 32, 33 years old. And I was married, had a couple of kids. My wife said, I want a house. And I thought, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I had a friend I went to college with, Lawrence Milner, still friends. He had a smoked salmon business, and it was the best smoked salmon I'd ever had in my entire life. And at the time, he was the largest seller of smoked salmon to the entire continent of Australia, and he was servicing Harrods of London. And I thought, well, okay, if it's that good in these many places, it's not in LA, send it to me and let me see if I can sell it. Because I was tired of doing warm-ups. I was just tired of being behind the scenes and doing, hey, where you from, and saying the same things over and over again. And my stand-up career wasn't taking off. So I went to this place called Jillian's Deli in Larchmont in California here, little suburb. And I sold my first package of smoked salmon to this lady. She bought, 10 or 12 pounds. And I called my friend in Cape Town, woke him up. It was 3 a.m. or something there. And I said, you just made your first sale in the States. And so I started going from place to place, and every place I went, I was selling it. Well, at the time, prior to being called Costco, there was a place called the Price Club. And through a series of events, we were doing 80,000 pounds a month of smoked salmon in the Price Club. And then we got into Trader Joe's. And I thought, well, I guess this is where my living is going to be. I'm going to be a smoked salmon salesman because I'm doing pretty good at it. And a friend of mine, Dave Garrison, who was a ventriloquist in Indianapolis, had moved to LA and was trying to make it. And he got a call, and he said to me, you know what, Mark, I got this call from some network I've never heard called Nickelodeon. And they want me to audition for some kind of kids game show. I'm not interested. I want to be behind the scenes, become a producer, and work steady. So why don't you go to this audition instead of me? So I went with no expectations, not even knowing what it was. So I'm in the office, and they said, Dave Garrison? I said, Dave couldn't make it. My name is Mark. Can I audition instead of him? And they said, yeah, go ahead. So I went in, and I just...
That would not happen today, would it? Would that happen today?
It wouldn't allow you to audition unless an agent brought you in. It's all different now. So I did the audition, and I felt like $1,000,000. And the one thing I always did back in the day was if I got into an audition, I would get the exec producer's phone number, and I would get the casting director's phone number, and they would give it to you back then. And so I walked out of the audition, and there were no cell phones back then. I called from a payphone in front of a gas station to my agent, Richard. And I said, Richard, I just auditioned for some show called Double Dare, and I'm going to get this. And he said, yeah, good luck. I'm sending 12 other clients over there in the next 2 days. And I thought to myself, well, why the hell didn't you send me over? So I got 3 callbacks, and I knew they were going to start shooting the end of September. And it was the weekend before Labor Day. And I called Mike Klinghoffer, the exec producer, and I said, so what's the deal? Because I knew they had auditioned 1,000 people in New York. And the reason they came to LA is they didn't like anybody in New York. And he said, funny you called. We were just talking about you. And I said, about what? He said, well, there's you and one other guy that we're interested in maybe hosting the show. But, when we did the auditions, we had adults play the part of kids. And we don't know if you're good with kids. And I said, well, I have 2 kids. He said, yeah, that means nothing. And I said, well, I used to be a magician and do kids' parties. He said, yeah, that doesn't mean anything either. So, excuse me, I came up with the idea. I said, well, why don't you fly me and whoever this other person is to New York, put us in a studio with real live kids, run the show, and let the best man win. He said, I'll call you back in a half hour. Phone rings. He goes, what are you doing over Labor Day? I said, coming to New York? He said, yep. So they flew me to New York, and I went and did the audition in a studio with kids. And then I left, and this other guy, to this day, I don't know who it was, went in and did his audition. And 2 days later, I got the phone call. Congratulations, you're the host of Double Dare. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. You auditioned 1,000 people in New York and 1,000 in LA. Why did I get this job? And he said, well, quite honestly, you and the other guy were quite similar. But at the end of his audition, he looked at the camera and said, is that it? Or you guys want me to do something else? And I said, we'll be back with more Double Dare right after this. And because I threw it to commercial, they thought that was more professional, and it changed my life.
Wow. That's an incredible story, Mark. I didn't know the whole backstory to that. That's incredible. As they say, the rest is history, right? I mean, yeah. Double Dare was on for a long time, and then you've kind of reinvented it as well over the last several years. And you did a touring live show, which opened to huge numbers of people.
Yeah, we used to play 20,000 seat arenas and sell them out. When we did the last tour right before COVID, I kept it to like 3,500 to 5,000 because I'm much older and I can't run through those arenas and pick contestants at the speed I once did. But we had a good time doing it. Who knew that was going to change my life? And yes, I exec produced Double Dare 2000. And when we came back the last way, I was exec producer, and then I was the announcer sidekick to an influencer. Don't get me started on that term. But nonetheless, it's been an interesting ride. And then I was at the Food Network for 20 years. So I've hosted over 25 shows, but the two that have stuck, maybe three, Double Dare, Unwrapped, and I did a show called What Would You Do that has some sort of cult following that people love. I never enjoyed doing the show, but for some people, it was their favorite show I did.
Wow. All right. So I want to ask you something. Did you fire your agent after he didn't send you? And did you call him and say, screw you, buddy, I got the job?
No, he actually negotiated an amazing deal for me to the point where I still get paid from doing that show because I own a piece of it. And when we brought it back the last time, international format deals happened. So I get regular checks for a show I started in 1986 that still come in. So no, he negotiated a very good deal for me in syndication when we went into syndication. And then when we toured is where I made a fair amount of dough because I was getting not quite George Carlin money, but pretty good George Carlin money. And I owned a percentage of the merchandise, so I was getting paid on that side as well. So, it's called show business because it's more business than show. And luckily, I was surrounded by people who knew what they were doing, and then I learned from them.
That's amazing because you know what? A lot of people would have fired their agent and said, why wouldn't you have sent me? You had a lot of foresight in that. I just recently saw an ad for some other thing Nickelodeon's doing with slime. Are you involved in that? I can't remember what it was, but it was a passing
slime
commercial.
time with the NFL. And as a matter of fact, I did a guest spot on it last week. I was having lunch with Tony DeCopel and Nate Burleson from CBS Morning. And Nate at lunch said to me, we're shooting NFL Slime Time. You want to be a surprise guest? And I went, yeah, sure. So the next day I went over to CBS and shot that with him. A quick walk on. I was on and off in 90 seconds, but they paid me. So it was fun.
But still fun. I mean, the whole thing lives on, that was a huge legacy show for Nickelodeon. I mean, it was their biggest show, was it not?
Yeah, it put them on the map, put me on the map, put them on the map, and who would have thought, I started that show when I was 34. I'm 71 now. The fact that I'd still be involved with that thing is insane to me.
It's amazing and really unheard of in our business to have a show with that kind of longevity. Now, you had mentioned Johnny Carson earlier. You were on his show, right? Doing stand-up.
Well, I did it with Jay. I interviewed Johnny when I was at the radio station in Indiana. I still have that cassette, which is funny. I was a nervous wreck. But I did it with Jay. And at the time, I was hosting 4 shows on TV, which they thought was interesting. And I got bumped for a year. You get booked, and then for some reason, a bigger name comes on. And you go to the studio sometimes and sit in a dressing room or green room, and then you're told you're not doing it. That happened for a year. And then I finally got on. And the night I got on was with Burt Reynolds, who was having a book tour and going through a divorce, and he wasn't very happy. And I won't go through the whole story because you can go on YouTube and just Google Marc Summers and Burt Reynolds Tonight Show. And it was insane what happened, throwing things at each other. And people thought it was all staged. And I always say I'm not that good of an actor. It just happened spontaneously. And it still runs. It's another thing I get money from because they play that thing around the world. The 10 most bizarre moments on late night talk shows. And whenever it runs, I go to the mailbox 3 days later and there's money there. So, it's funny how our industry works, that you can have done something 35 years ago and the money keeps coming in. So it's a nice little bonus.
Well, I had been a talent agent in Florida, and at least you're getting good residuals. When I was booking talent, even when they did a national commercial, you could only get 10%. And the day rate was like $375. So I was making $37.50. And I would spend, weeks getting somebody booked on a national car commercial or something. And yes, every 13 weeks, I got a little $37.50. It was, well, I was producing also. That was my side hustle.
I got it.
I represented like 500 people. But in Florida at the time, there was no exclusivity. So it was how fast your beeper went off. That's how old I am. I was carrying a beeper or a fax came through. because the casting directors would beep or cast and, or fax and say, we have these roles. And you had to beep the talent that you wanted to go. If you weren't the first person to hit them, they were kind of like obligated to go with someone else because there was no exclusivity. It was a really tough time, but I loved it.
I did one movie, and I didn't understand how the whole extra thing worked. And I'd seen all these people who were extras who were running to the phone every 2 seconds, trying to figure out what they were going to do for the rest of the week. And I thought to myself, man, I never want to be that desperate where, my life depends on going to the phone, because this was long before there were cell phones once again. And people were fighting for this hardline phone to find out if they had a job the next day or any other jobs for the week. And, you got to want it really bad to be doing that.
It's not a job for the faint at heart. That's right.
Not at all.
You have to be able to be rejected. You have to have a thick skin. So let me ask you that. How did you develop that hard exterior?
I just wanted it so bad. I just never accepted the word no, as I said, and I just kept moving forward. I mean, I wasn't even very good when I first started as a stand-up. I sucked. And when I first started at Magic Castle, I wasn't very good, but I kept making phone calls. And, I used to have people say to me, I'll hire you if you promise that you'll stop calling me. I was trying to get a warm-up on a show called Hour Magazine, which became a big hit. And Lillian Mizrahi was the talent coordinator, and she kept saying, we don't need you, we don't need you, we don't need you. And one night she was in a drugstore, CVS in Encino, and I ran into her, and she saw me and tried to run the other way. And I chased her through the entire drugstore saying, come on, give me a shot, give me an interview, give me this, give me that. Well, sure enough, the next day I got a phone call from Lillian saying, okay, Marty Berman, our exec producer, wants to meet with you. So I went and met with him, and he walked in, he said, Marc Summers, what's your real name? I remember that was an opening line. And I said, what difference does it make? He said, nobody's called Marc Summers. And I said, well, my name's Mark Berkowitz, but the Son of Sam happened, and I couldn't get an audition for anywhere, so I became Marc Summers, and that's a long story. And he hired me, and Gary Collins, who was the host, kind of took me under his wing and said, you want to be a host? Well, you don't dress like a host, and you don't have host hair. So he helped me with my wardrobe and sent me to get my hair cut. And I remember I went to leave to pay the woman who cut my hair. She said, it's on Gary. So, I ran into very nice people who did very nice things for me to help me build my career in the right direction.
Well, I think that takes us back to one of the first things I said is you're a very kind person. You're caring, you're warm. And I'm sure that people loved your enthusiasm too. That never say die, no, feeling that you were emitting, and then they were, happy to help you, which is incredible.
Past, but I guess in a somewhat light way. And I remember I was obsessed with talk shows as a kid. I would watch Mike Douglas. I would watch Merv. I would watch Johnny. I would watch whatever talk show was on. And one night, Merv was doing an hour special with Bob Hope. And his last question was, hey, Bob, if you had to point to one person who helped make your career, who would it be? And Bob Hope went. And I thought about that. And he said, nobody was ever really there. Everything I did on my own. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm ever lucky enough to make it, nobody has really helped me at this point. Maybe I'll be able to help somebody. And I have spent a large part of my career trying to open doors for other humans and been pretty darn successful. I mean, Ryan Seacrest is a student of mine. I hired him and put him on a show I was exec producing called Ultimate Revenge, and was involved. And I'm not going to go into this story. It's way too long, but he was working for me when he got the offer for Idol. And I was the one who got him out of our deal so he could go do Idol. And then you and I worked on a show with Robert Irvine, who came to me and said, teach me how to do TV. And I was able to do that. And he was a great student. And Guy Fieri, I was exec producing, I was just hosting Next Food Network Star at the time. And I had him come to LA, and I drove him around and introduced him to agents. And the agent he's with today, I got for Guy. And so I've been able to help other humans, and it's been a fun part of my life.
That's amazing. You were always so kind, and really the first person, if I was ever having a bad day, or, I always knew that your door was open.
Yeah.
And, that was always a comfort. So let's talk about Food Network a little bit, because you appeared on Food Network programs, and then you were also executive producing shows for them, and still may be, correct? I mean, you have a lot going on.
I'm still consulting on Restaurant Impossible, but I'm sort of stepping back in a lot of that arena. I started off trying to pitch a show, and all the time I was pitching the show, they kept saying, "Well, why aren't you on Food Network?" And I thought to myself, "Well, I don't even cook. Why would I be on Food Network?" But somebody had done their homework and found out that the kids who grew up watching me on Nickelodeon were old enough now to turn to Food Network, and they thought that people would follow me over there. And that's what they did. The first show I did was called "It's a Surprise." It was about surprise parties. The surprise was nobody was watching, and they sent me on a special to do called the National Team Pastry Championship in Colorado. And they handed me a tape at the time and said, "We've done a couple of specials on the show called Unwrapped with a guy by the name of Marc Silverstein. Take a look and just tell us what you think." So I watched it, and I said, at the time on A&E, what was the show? Biography was the number one show. And I said, "I think Unwrapped can be what Biography is, for Food Network, and I think we should do it." So we shot, I think, 13 episodes. They put us on Monday nights at 10:30, and it died. And the president of the network called me and said, "The show's not working at 10:30 on Monday night. We're going to try an experiment. We'll move you to 9 o'clock on Monday nights for 4 weeks. If it works, great. If not, see ya." Well, they put it on Monday nights at 9. It exploded. And then we were on from 9 to 10. And then we did a show called Trivia Unwrapped. And it was all Marc Summers all the time for 90 minutes on Food Network. I was guy before guy. And, at the time, look, Emerald deserves a plaque and should be on Food Network to this day. And everybody assumed that Emerald was the number one show. Unwrapped was the number one show on Food Network for a number of years, and was very competitive. And we lasted for a long time. We shot hundreds of episodes, and until Chopped happened, we were the longest running series. So a lot of things that happened in my career have happened by mistake, but I've also been able to take those mistakes and manipulate them into some positivity.
I don't believe there's any mistakes.
Really?
Things happen for a reason. I do. I believe that it's, call me crazy, but I do believe in the power of energy and connections. And I think that people gravitate toward you, and you're one of those examples. And that doesn't mean that things don't go wrong and you knew how to pivot and fix them or make them, change it to make it fit for your personality. But I really do believe very strongly that things happen for a reason. And I know,
He said there are no coincidences. Things are there for a reason.
I agree with your agent. I agree. I don't believe that. That show Unwrapped was really one of my favorite shows to work on ever, even till this day. I loved learning about how things were made, and how they were put together. I was always fascinated. And I remember one time, it may have been when I came in to interview to be on Restaurant Impossible as a producer. I had just done a Bonomo Taffy backstory.
Yep.
And the owner, I don't know how it came up that we were working together or something, but they sent me this huge box to give to you. And I just couldn't understand. It tastes good, but you could lose all your teeth eating it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a childhood favorite. Hold on, don't go away. Hold on, stay right there.
Oh, no, he has Bonomo Taffy in his room.
Along the way, I was sent chocolate, Bonomo's Turkish Taffy, banana, and, of course, famous vanilla. So,
and the thing about that, the way to eat it right, you take it and you smack it and crack it, and then you eat it, right? Isn't that the one?
That's exactly the proper way to do it. Yep, absolutely.
I mean, there were a lot of amazing things and fun times that we had on that show, but anytime we went to these manufacturers, they would send us home with so much swag. Yep. I remember, shooting a tasty cake, and I thought my kids and my husband's head they were going to pop off with all the peanut butter tandy cakes that I showed up with. And
the best.
That really was such a great show. And I know it went on after you, and it was very disappointing because I still think you were the best host of that show.
It didn't last very long with the other guy.
No, it didn't. And I understand why. So how did you start Dinner Impossible? And then you kind of morphed it and then started Restaurant Impossible. And did you think the idea was impossible when you started working through the idea?
No, here's what happened. People, for whatever reason, always thought I was a producer. I never understood that. And so um, I kept getting videotapes and letters from this guy named Robert Irvine, and I just threw them all away. And I get a phone call from my accountant in New York. I was living in Philly at the time. And he said, the IRS wants to audit you and you need to come in here right away. Oh my God. So I said to my wife, Alice, and I said, something's wrong. I got to go see our accountant in New York. So I took the train in and I get in and he said, go in the office over there and I'll be in a minute. So I walk into the office and there's some guy sitting there and he goes, I won't tell you what he said, but he said, hello, in some dirty word. And I said, hey, who are you? He said, my name is Robert Irvine. I said, and he goes, I keep sending you tapes and stuff with pictures. And I went, oh yeah, I kind of remember. And I said, well, what are you here for? He had found out somehow, to this day, I don't know how, who my accountant was, called my accountant, and my accountant called me to meet Robert. Okay. So Robert said, I want to be on Food Network. I said, stand in line, you and about 1,000 other people. Okay. And he started telling me about his life and one thing after another. And I said, okay, if we decide to work together, it's going to take forever. And he said, well, I'm really good. I said, I don't know if you're good or if you're not. And he said, well, I'm doing a personal appearance this weekend in somewhere in New Jersey in like a moose hall or something. And I said, well, I'm not going to be here Sunday. I'm going back to LA. He said, no, you're not. You got to come to this event and watch me work. And I was somewhat amazed because that's kind of how I worked. You know, I was just really aggressive and he was aggressive and I admired that. So I called my wife. I said, I'm not coming home this weekend. I'm going to go see some guy and then I'll come home on Monday. So I went to see him do his act. And he said to me afterwards, what do you think? And he was just all pumped up. And I said, that may be the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And his head exploded. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, here's the thing. It's amazing. As a performer, you're awful. But somehow you had the audience in the palm of your hand. I don't understand it because you really don't have the skills. And he said, well, that's why I want you. I want you to teach me how to do this. So I said to him at that point, it's going to take at least 2 years. He said, I'm ready. So we started pitching shows to the Food Network, and it was no, nothing that made them interested. And the executive at the time, Charles, said to me, can you do something with a clock? And I said, I don't know what that even means. And he said, well, he's got to get something done by a particular time. So we found out about a half hour north of New York City, the New York Knicks basketball team and the hockey team, the Rangers, had a facility where they practiced. And then there was this sort of central dining area. And we figured out some of them needed certain foods because they had diets that had to be met up. It was all sort of craziness. And we met with a nutritionist up there. And so I came up with this idea that we go up to this training facility where they practice. And Robert, when they're done at rehearsal or done with their practice at noon, there have to be all these different courses. And, could he, if he came in at 9 a.m, just use the elements that were in the refrigerator that day? Made no sense to me to a certain extent, but they gave us permission to do it. So we went up there and shot that and turned it into like a 8 or 9 minute sizzle reel to kind of demonstrate what the show was. And we showed it to Charles, who was the executive at Food Network. And he said, I kind of like the concept. I'm going to give you X amount of dollars to do a pilot. So we did a pilot where Robert had, and by the way, we always did this for real. Somebody was getting married and they were having, I forget, 100 people. So Robert had, in 8 hours, with no food, no kitchen, no help, had to make 1,000 hors d'oeuvres and 200 sit-down dinners, I think is what it was. Maybe it was 200 people. And I was scared out of my mind because I didn't know if he could do it. And we had all these people come in. Julie, who worked with me on this thing, we did the pilot together. And, we kept auditioning all these people to say, would you be interested? And they said, well, who's the chef? And we said, we can't tell you. And they said, oh, I bet it's Emerald. It's like, well, maybe, it may not. And so I said, if this is the most important day of your life, you need to keep in mind that this person we're using has never done this before. So it may not work. And you may have a lot of people that are very hungry. And people didn't care because they wanted to be on television.
Right.
So we finally selected this nice guy. And we sent Robert to this place and he got the mission. And I was scared out of my mind because I didn't know if it was going to get done. Well, he did a great job with it. And we edited that pilot for a year. Okay. Food Network kept saying we didn't know what we were doing, that we did a horrible job on it. They gave us notes upon notes upon notes. But a year after we did that, we got picked up and we launched and we shot, I forget how many episodes, I think 90 episodes at the time of Dinner Impossible.
Wow.
And then one of the execs at Food Network wanted us to turn it into something else, which became Restaurant Impossible. And I exec produced 160 of those. And so it was fun. It was a lot of work. We were on the road all the time. Sometimes we'd shoot 2 or 3 in a month. But the prep, because you had to prep those things as a producer, of finding the backstory and what's the reason we're coming and what should Robert know and what should Robert not know. And, and that was really fly by the seat of your pants television. There was an outline, but we almost never followed that outline because you never knew what Robert was going to do. And we didn't know what the people were going to do. And that's the kind of TV I really like to. I don't like doing fake reality.
Well, we talked a lot about that too in our meetings because you were adamant about that. And to this day, people will ask me because I, go out and shoot other, unscripted shows and they want to know.
Yeah.
Is everything already figured out? Does everybody know? And when they specifically asked about Restaurant Impossible, I would say that show unfolds in front of your eyes. And that is really happening in real time. And they couldn't believe it.
I had a meeting at a network recently, and they wanted to know if I'd come back and produce some shows for them. And I said, if you want to do fake reality, I'm the wrong guy. If you want this all to be made up stuff, I have no interest. But if you want it to be real, because there's nothing better than the real story, I'm happy to help you. And so we're having conversations now. I have to ask myself if I want to get back into that racket. But I always thought the stuff we did was good because it was what you saw is what you got kind of situation.
And that show really morphed and there was so much relationship. I remember when there was a little bit of a shift and I'm like, oh my God, Robert as Dr. Phil, I couldn't wrap my head around it at first, but it really took on a life.
We didn't know he could do that.
We didn't. And
it just evolved.
I was out there and, was amazed at the things that just came out of people's hearts and their mouths. And he's such a big, tough guy, but he's really a big teddy bear. I mean, he can be a real softie and he really had, a place in his heart for a lot of these people. It was really, he does. And it was really amazing just to kind of watch all of that unfold. So you talked about being on the road a lot. And you and I have had this conversation about finding balance. And, I always have said you're like the ever ready bunny. Every time I turn around, you're running here, you're doing this, you're doing another show, you're on the Chew, you're on the View, you're on it. Like, do you ever sleep? Do you ever relax? Now you're talking about another thing. After 5 seconds ago, you said, well, I'm taking a step back. Now you're talking about another show, which I would love to work with you on, by the way. But anyway, how did you find balance? I mean, your wife is Alice. She's lovely. Your kids are amazing. You worked with your son a little bit on Restaurant Impossible. How did you find a balance? Or was there no balance in the beginning? Or, were you resented by your family? Because, people don't get us. A lot of people who are not in this business, they don't get us. My friends cut me off, by the way, Mark. Friends have cut me off. Because I'm not available. I'm not available enough to them.
Well, we have no friends, but that's just part of our lives. Listen, the joke I always say, I've been married 48 years, but I've only been home 14 of them. And it's kind of true. The Nickelodeon tours, lasted 3 years, then 2 years. Then we came back and did another 2 years. Restaurant Impossible on the road all the time. Dinner Impossible on the road all the time. I was fortunate that my wife was very supportive. She never said, you're coming home and you're not doing that show anymore. No, she was just happy as a clam to let me go play television and do what I wanted to do. COVID's put everything to a screeching halt. I did my first big trip since COVID is lightened up, but it really hasn't. Um, Last week, this was the week, I have this friend. I got a phone call 10, 12 years ago from this guy in Bangor, Maine. He said, I'm an advertising executive, but I've always wanted to host a talk show, and I'm doing one now in the back of a comic book shop. Would you come and do it? I thought to myself, well, this is the oddest thing in the world. Who does a talk show in Bangor, Maine? I said, do you have any video of this? And he said, yeah. So he sent me a video of it. I thought, this isn't bad. I'm going to fly there. So I flew myself to Bangor and did his show. And he was quite good. Did his research, did his homework, was quite entertaining. And so over the last 10 or 12 years, he's now become very successful. It's called The Night Show. He bases it on Bangor, but he covers the entire state on a regular basis, beats Saturday Night Live. And it's gotten that good. He's got an orchestra. It's amazing. And so he called me to go do it again a week or so ago. So I flew to Boston. I had dinner that night with some friends. I got up the next morning, drove to Bangor, did the show, drove back to Boston, but stopped first in Portland, Maine to have food, and then Salem, New Hampshire to have food. Went and visited my brother for 2 days in Newburgh, New York, and then went into New York City to have meetings on certain shows. A couple of friends of mine are doing Little Shop of Horrors now, so I went to see them. And so I was on the road for 9 days, and I hadn't done that in 3 years, and you had to scrape me off the wall. Excuse me. I was exhausted because I was out of shape. And once again, hitting that big 7-0, you find that your body may not be able to do things that it once did. And I had a hard time recovering. I'm still kind of recovering, as you can hear.
That was a whirlwind of a week.
Yeah, I did too
sure.
much. I tried to do too much.
Well, one thing I didn't ask you about is theater, because you also performed on the stage. Are you still doing any of that? Because I know you like to kind of dabble a little bit in live performances.
Part of the reason I was in New York was to make that kind of happen. And so, we're bringing the one-man show back, which we'll be doing in August near you in a theater near Hershey, Pennsylvania. And then we're going to Buffalo, New York. And the ultimate goal of this is to bring in some people from the theater world in New York City and see if we can get it off Broadway. So that's what we're working on right now. We're doing some revamps on the script and, to try and memorize 70 pages again at this point in my life. I'm nervous about it. But, we're going to be doing the one-man show called The Life and Slimes of Marc Summers this summer. So
The Life of Slime. I love that.
Yeah. And so
forget that's taking a step back. Okay. You're full of crap.
I'm not doing as much. My son is doing a lot now. He's one of the top exec producers at Food Network. He's doing a show with Alex Guarnacelli. He did the last series of Iron Chefs. He's doing a bunch of pilots. And so it's fun to watch your kid, who you saw sort of grow first with Dinner. And he shot B-roll for us on Dinner Impossible. And, now he's exec producing a bunch of shows. So it's cool to see that.
But he grew up going on set with you and watching you and learning the business through your eyes, and then through his own lens of seeing, where he fit in.
He might have been 10 or 11. I was doing a show called Pick Your Brain, and he used to sit in the director's booth and make notes and give them to me. And then we go to editing. I'd go, son of a gun, he was absolutely right about this stuff. So pretty funny.
That's amazing. Yeah. And is he's still in California?
Yeah, he lives in LA.
So he must be doing a lot of traveling. So he's got that same lifestyle.
Not quite as bad as we once did. He's actually shooting this next series of Supermarket Stakeout in LA, but they've been shooting in, I think, Nashville and Knoxville and Phoenix and all sorts of places.
Amazing. My goodness. So if you think back on your career, and of course it's still going, obviously, is there one experience or situation in your mind, maybe that Burt Reynolds situation was it, but is there one that stands out that was just like the most bizarre, terrible experience for you?
Well, the Burt Reynolds thing was weird. I remember calling my wife from the car that was driving me back home, and I said, either the best thing in the world just happened to me or the worst thing just happened to me. The headlines in the New York Post the next day were Burt goes berserk on Tonight. And I kept getting called from, I was on Howard Stern Entertainment Tonight. I was everywhere. And people said, what was it like? And I said, it was like going 3 rounds with Muhammad Ali. I mean, he was out of his mind. And so who knew that that was going to happen? And, Jay called me the next day. Yeah, what's going on with you, Bert? What happened there? And it's like, you went your whole life to go on the Tonight Show, and then this guy comes on and tries to screw it up. And I looked at him as a heckler from my years at the Comedy Store, and I wasn't going to let him take over my spot. And at one point, he had thrown water on me, and I reciprocated, and he strong-armed me, and the cup hit me in the face. I thought he'd broken a tooth. And then when he sort of went down, I got him again, and I actually got the water on him. And what you don't see, because the camera doesn't take that shot, is the audience gave me a standing ovation because they thought he was just a big bully picking on, this guy who I grew up watching on Nickelodeon, and now he's doing a show on Food Network, and he's not getting any respect. And so the audience, for the most part, defended me. The next day, I was at a friend's house, Steve Bender, who was an exec producer, and he said, I know Bert's publicist. Do you want me to call him? I said, yeah. So he said, hey, I got Marc Summers in the room here. What happened last night with Bert? And he said, Bert referred to me as a bottom feeder of show business who didn't give the movie star any respect. That was Bert's feeling. So go on YouTube and watch it and make up your own decisions,
I've
But yeah, that was
it.
the insane thing,
That was the most insane thing. Yeah, I mean, it was nuts. So what has been your favorite project to host or be the executive producer on and develop?
Well, there's a lot of firsts, Double Dare, because it put me on the map, was certainly one that I'm always going to look at. Unwrapped, if somebody would have told me I'd have the #1 show on Food Network and I didn't know how to cook, that was, bizarre.
That was like a decade, right? It was like 10 years.
Oh, yeah. This was a weird story, and this was amazing. I was always a cable guy. I could never get on the network. No matter what I did, the network wouldn't buy me. And so Bob Noah, who was a game show guy, called me up and he said, he was producing a show called Scrabble on NBC. And he said, we're going to do favorite game show host week. Would you like to be on? I thought, oh, my God. Now, I've been doing Double Dare about 2 years. I said, that's amazing that you're thinking of me for this. Yes. So I said, okay, we're doing it the week of whatever, and we'll call you and give the details. I hung up. I said, Alice, you won't believe it. I'm going to be on favorite game show host week on Scrabble. She said, well, that's nice. Well, an hour later, the phone rang, and he said, I got some good news and bad news. And I said, oh, God, what's the bad news? He said, the network said you haven't been on television long enough to be a favorite game show host, so they don't want you to be on the show. I don't know, man. He said, but I do have some good news. I said, what's that? So I said, well, I want Chuck to play. Chuck Woolery was the host. I want Chuck to play. So is it okay if Marc Summers hosts Scrabble while Chuck plays? He goes, oh, he can host it. He just can't be on as a favorite game show host. So I got my first network job by some dumbass NBC executive who wasn't smart enough to realize that hosting the show was actually a lot more important than being a guest. And so for a week, I hosted Scrabble when Chuck Woolery played the game. And I thought, whoa, now I've really died and gone to heaven. So, those kind of moments stick out in my mind. And it was just, some series of luck and quick thinking by Bob Noah to come up with that concept,
Well, I think you've had so many experiences and, just talking about hearing you say, I'm taking a little bit of a step back, but then all these other things that are percolating for you. And I know it's in your blood. It's almost like you can't walk away from it because it keeps reeling you back in.
Yeah, I wish it didn't sometimes. I wish I didn't have this passion, this desire. And I've always said to my wife, you see performers on stage who shouldn't be on stage anymore. Towards the end of Rickles' life, he kept doing it and he shouldn't have. And there's been several comedians like that. And I always said, Alice, when you see me up there and I can't do it anymore, you need to pull me aside and say, okay, it's time. And so I still think I have it. I'm a half step slower. There's no question in my mind. I still think I think pretty quick and my humor's there and all that stuff, but it takes me longer. And so, the end is coming, but I think we're quite there yet.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because I love, staying in touch with you and hearing about all these, exciting projects that are coming your way. And I'm certainly going to go see you live when you're on your. I did see you at the one-man show. I don't remember. Was it the I don't remember what the location was, but it was in Philadelphia, and it was amazing.
Oh, did you maybe see the documentary? Maybe you came to see the documentary. That was it. Because I don't think.
Maybe it was. It was maybe that's what it was. It was the documentary, and then you did you did talk to the audience, and I remember going upstairs in the green room where it was
Yeah,
like sort of a green room.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But yes, I'm looking forward to that. I just actually saw Robert and Justin. They had something at the Boardroom Spirits, and I popped in. I hadn't seen them since I left Restaurant Impossible, really.
Which was, how many years ago was that now? Like 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe, huh?
2015.
15, yeah, so 7 years. Wow.
Yeah.
That's flown by. Yeah, I talked to Robert. We Zoomed, but face to face, I haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah, it was nice to see them, and I really surprised them because Justin knew I was coming, but nobody else did. And I walked in, and Jill was there. Her face just was like, "Oh my God!" It
That's
was
not,
fun. It was really really nice to reconnect, and I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to work with you on RI, and I've gotten to know you, and you've just been an amazing mentor and friend. And, I appreciate you so much. And I'm not joking. I would love to work with you again, Marc.
if it turns into something, I'll call you.
I have to say, I've had a lot of jobs. It drove my father crazy because, he was an entrepreneur and had his own businesses, but, it was at a time where people kept their jobs. They stayed there for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I wasn't willing to kind of settle. And so I moved around. I knew what I wanted. I wasn't sure exactly how to get there. But I realized that kind of stepping out of my comfort zone and even, meeting you for the first time, I admired you for so long. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to meet Marc Summers for the first time. And it was just, you just made me feel so comfortable, and I'm just so grateful for
Well,
all the opportunities that you've given me.
I based my life on two things. One, the golden rule: treat people as you would want to be treated. And when I was doing magic, I met a guy who was a mentor to me when I was a kid, Dick Oslin. And he said to me once, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice." And I kind of live my life that way. Just because you're on TV doesn't make you special.
Well,
And we've all been lucky to do what we've done and make a living at it. We've worked our rear ends to do it. But I just want to have fun and have fun with people. And you and I have had so much fun. We've had crisis on sets, and we go, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And then at the end of the night, we're laughing and just having fun and smiling. So keep doing what you're doing. I'll call you if this other gig happens.
that I would love
Who knows
that.
what's
I would love that. And just as a side note, uh, a lot of our listeners are people who are breaking into the business or maybe
Mhm.
making a shift in their career path. So a lot of the things that we talked about today about, not taking no for an answer, getting out of your comfort zone, being kind, those are all really such important messages to tell people,
Yep.
because this today is so different than when I got started, when you got started. Kids come out of college and they want to be a director right away, or they
I
don't
know.
understand what it's like to sort of work their way up and really be a sponge and learn from other people. And I think they miss out on the fact that that's actually a critical way that you build your personality, and how you become the producer or director that you are, is by learning
Half
from
the fun
others.
is getting there. You just don't realize it at the time. And I had this girl come into my office once, just graduated from, I think it was Arizona State. And I said, "What do you want to do?" And she said, "I want to be a producer." And I said, "What's a producer do?" And she said, "Produce." And I said, "There's no job president open today. You have no experience." But, I think MTV initially started that, where they'd hire people with no experience because they had no money, and they would pay people to learn on the job. But there's a different mentality. I was having dinner with a friend who does a lot of Broadway the other night. And, Broadway is tough. It's 8 shows a week, and until you become a star, you barely get by, but it's a passion. And she's saying that these young kids who are graduating college and just getting parts on Broadway are protesting the union. They don't want to do 8 shows a week anymore. And they want to get paid a lot more money. And it's like, holy cow, like 0.1% of the world gets to do what you do. It's such a
Exactly.
magical thing. And you want less time and more money, get the hell out of here. It just drives me insane that nobody's willing to put in the work, and you and I would, if we had to stay up till 2 a.m, sometimes we get off the set and didn't know what we were going to do the next day. And we'd sit around until 2 a.m. trying to figure out what the hell we were going to do because we had to get up at 6 and meet Robert to do something else. And, that's what we do. And that's why you're still doing what you're doing. And I'm still doing what I'm doing, and I'm still like a dinosaur, but the younger generation doesn't often want to put in that time, Frustrating.
I agree. There are some kids that are coming out of school. I think they have access to so many things and tools that we didn't, and also have that opportunity. So some of these kids coming out of schools are just dynamic. I mean, they can shoot, they can edit, they can write. They do have other skills that I may not have had when I got out of school.
It exists. You can sit in your bedroom on a phone and do a movie now. We never had that.
No.
No. And I see talent sometimes. I see young kids, 15, 16 years old on camera that are unbelievable because from the time they were 9, they were doing this stuff. And over the last 5 or 6 years, they've gotten really good at it. So the quality of some of these folks is pretty remarkable. But, I taught some classes at USC and, everybody thinks they're Spielberg. And, daddy gives them $25,000 to shoot a movie for their senior project. And then they expect to start doing features. It doesn't work that way. It just very rarely. Some people get lucky, but not often.
So as your parting comment with us, if you were going to give advice to somebody who may have been a talent, who wants to move into production or just wants to get into this industry, what would your words of wisdom be for our listeners?
Over Mr. Cubitt's 7th grade shop class door, there was a little thing that said, work your plan and plan your work. And you just can't go in there and shoot from the hip. You got to figure out, what do I want to do? Okay, how am I going to do it? And when I lecture to college kids, I say, who do you admire? And they'll say, Oprah or Spielberg or whoever they say. For the longest time, it was that girl on Entertainment Tonight, Menounos, used to make my head explode. And I used to say, what you need to do is FedEx these people. You can get anybody's address. I mean, if you literally Google right now, where does Oprah Winfrey live? Her address pops up, okay? And I FedEx people, okay? And your opening line as a college student wanting to get in the room for a job is, dear so-and-so, I need some advice. You cannot start a letter by saying, I want a job, because the answer is always no. But if you say, I need some advice, people love to give advice, okay? And once you get in the door and meet with these people, then you can ask for the job. But you got to get in the door first. So those words, I need some advice, are key. But the power of FedEx is amazing, and social media. I'm a big admirer of the CBS morning show. I got attached to it a couple of years ago, and I watch it every morning. And I love what Tony and Nate do. So when I was going to New York last week, I just direct messaged both of them and said, hey, my name is Marc Summers, and this is what I did. And I'd love to meet you guys and have lunch. And luckily, they both grew up watching me. And now they're big time on the network. And the answer was right away, yes. So I took them to one of my favorite restaurants in New York. We sat there for 2.5 hours, and I just had the best time. And I don't know who was more excited, me or them, because they were very cool. And, once again, Nate asked me to be on the Slime Time show he does. But I was picking their brains as well. And it just was this love affair going on between broadcasters, because they respected what I had done. And I respected them as the new guys on the block who were, kicking ass and taking names. So it's just fun to do that kind of stuff. And I have a leg up because I've been on TV and a lot of people grew up watching me. And that opens doors, but not always,
Well, keep on keeping on, Marc. I just love hearing your stories and watching you still kicking ass out there. And I'm really excited to hear what transpires from your meetings. And I'm sure there will be more things on the horizon for you. I have no doubt. And I look forward to seeing you. When did you say you're going to be in Pennsylvania?
We're doing the rehearsal start in July, and we're going to be doing it in August. I'll let you know.
Excellent. I will be there.
Excellent job. I'm applauding you.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you so much for carving out some time for me. I'm really, really grateful. So happy. Subscribe to our podcast to hear more.